Before sunrise, the serfs were already moving, plowing, mending fences, sewing, repairing things they didn't own. They were tied to the land itself, unable to leave, marry, or even sell property without their lord's permission. In exchange for protection and a small hut to sleep in, they paid a steep price, heavy taxes, and long days of unpaid labor. Their world rarely stretched beyond the fields. Each week, they worked the Lord's land first, and only afterward could they tend to their own small plots just to survive. They weren't slaves, but they weren't free either. Generation after generation, families remained rooted in the same soil. Still, life wasn't nothing but misery. Faith, family, and festivals brought brief moments of warmth and color to an otherwise harsh routine. Serfs were the foundation of the system, the hands that fed everyone above them. Without their labor, the medieval order would have collapsed. At first glance, free peasants looked just like serfs. Same tools, same worn hands, same hard days. But one difference changed everything: freedom. They could move if they chose. They could bargain. They could leave a lord's land entirely. Instead of owing forced labor, they paid rent, sometimes in coins, sometimes in crops or livestock. And that single freedom created something rare in the medieval world: opportunity. Some rose into prosperous yeomen, owning their own farms, and even hiring others to work for them. Their lives were still simple, but they carried something serfs didn't: dignity and control. No master could command them at will. In a society built on obligation, free peasants were the quiet sign that Europe was beginning to shift from service and bondage toward rent, trade, and money. The low clergy, parish priests, monks, and nuns lived close to ordinary people. They might not have had riches, but they held something more powerful: spiritual authority. They baptized newborns, heard confessions, blessed marriages, and buried the dead. Monks copied books by candlelight, brewed ale, and worked gardens behind monastery walls. They preserved learning in an age when many kings and nobles couldn't even read. Their teachings shaped how communities understood sin and salvation, mercy and justice. Most lived humble and devoted lives, though the Church's influence could also invite corruption. But whether saintly or flawed, the clergy carried immense weight. In a world where heaven felt close and hell felt real, a priest's words could matter as much as a noble's sword. Beyond the fields and castles, another force was growing: the burghers, merchants, craftsmen, and guild leaders who gained power not from land, but from trade. In cities like Bruges, Florence, and Venice, workshops echoed with hammer strikes and market bells. Guilds controlled quality, prices, and apprenticeships, turning skill into security. In the city, money mattered more than birth, and a sharp merchant could rise higher than a noble who only had a title. Their rise changed Europe. Burghers challenged nobles not with armies, but with wealth, financing kings, funding wars, and expanding trade routes that mattered more than old feudal roads. Slowly, gold began to replace grain as the true measure of power. They weren't warriors. They weren't lords. But over time, their ledgers reshaped Europe more than many battles ever did. Then came the knights, armored, mounted, and trained for war, the visible face of medieval force. From childhood they learned to fight, ride, and follow the ideals of chivalry, though many honored the code more in stories than in real life. In return for land and status, they swore loyalty and protection to their lord. But knighthood wasn't only about bravery, it was also about wealth. A full suit of armor could cost as much as a small village, meaning some knights owed their position more to fortune than faith. Medieval manuscripts reveal the truth behind the romance. lances snapping, swords tearing into mail, blood mixing with mud. To peasants, knights could be protectors or brutal enforcers. To kings, they were essential tools of control, loyal when rewarded, dangerous when ignored. Beneath the shining legend of chivalry was a world built on strength, honor, and the will to survive. Above the village priests stood the high clergy, bishops and abbots, men with vast estates, tithes and influence that reached straight into royal courts. Their cathedrals rose higher than castles, stone monuments to divine authority. The church held a staggering share of Europe's land, and with land came wealth, and even armies. A bishop could ride to war under the cross. An abbot could command hundreds of men. They advised kings, sat on councils, crowned monarchs, and declared which wars were holy. For peasants, the church offered salvation. For rulers, it offered legitimacy. Between heaven and earth, the high clergy held both, and they knew how to use that power like a weapon. Next were the great nobles, dukes, counts, and barons, rulers of entire regions who often governed like kings in their own right. Their castles dominated valleys and rivers, constant reminders that in the medieval world, land meant control. They collected taxes, held courts, and commanded armies of knights. Officially, they served the king. In reality, many were strong enough to defy him. They were the crown's foundation and its greatest threat, bound by oaths that could be broken as easily as a sword could swing. At the top stood the king, the source of land, law, and loyalty. Every manor, every title, every sworn sword ultimately traced back to him. He ruled by divine right, claiming his authority came from God. But power wasn't just faith, it was strength and strategy. Strong rulers could bend nobles to their will. Weak ones became kings in name only, trapped by the very lords meant to serve them. He was the symbol of the entire system, a single man, at the top of a chain made of oaths, armies, and obligations. And when kingdoms collapsed, people often said the same thing: the crown cracked first. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe for more upcoming releases.